All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Roll podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? We're recording this, of course, on election day because, of course, we're very well known for recording episodes and releasing them on the
Well,
exact same day.
for our
And
topicality, yeah.
yes, exactly. We're very, very well known for recording things on topic if you've never listened to our podcast. But, we haven't done an election movie episode since what? Fucking Bulworth, I think.
Bullworth, yeah.
And, instead of maybe choosing a more modern election film, I was thinking maybe we should watch a often forgotten 90s election film, made by maybe based libs.
Well, I mean, there isn't really a modern equivalent to speak of, which is part of the reason it's good to talk about this. Literally a movie that would not exist now because there's no money in making it. It would just be some representation slime.
Exactly. So, you know what? Without any fanfare, because of course we always come up with amazing bits for this episode, but I think we should just get into it. This is our review of Bob Roberts, a based lib classic. But before we get into our review this week, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational Moment of the Cringe Millennial Moment of the Week.
Week.
Woo! Yeah! All right. And you know what? Considering this is basically an election episode, I think we need to go back into the well of cringe millennials. I think this is maybe the second time, or I think this is the only time we've ever covered a cringe millennial twice on this show. But you know what? We have to talk about him, Brian. We're going to talk again about fucking JD Vance. Because since the last time we did a cringe millennial segment on JD Vance, a lot of cringe shit has happened.
Truly, he's such a millennial.
He is. He is the cringiest, soyest millennial. He is very soy. He is very cringe.
It's awesome. It's like looking in a mirror.
Yeah, it really fucking is. Oh, but yeah, let's definitely talk about some of the more hilarious things that he said. So I think this was in Kenosha. I don't remember. It was either Kenosha or somewhere, I think Ohio or somewhere else. But he went to a deli and he's like, hey, what is it? The zoo came to town. And it's like, no, JD Vance, the zoo doesn't travel.
The zoo's in town. The zoo is in town. I'm just wondering if the zoo came to town because I don't want to have to go too far to get it because I might have anxiety.
And I think this is also the place where he asked the employees if they had anything shitty to give so he could give to journalists. Like, what do you have here that sucks shit?
This is such a millennial thing. He got nervous talking to his service worker and fumbled his own jokes.
He's so relatable.
This is like your awkward friend in high school and you're sitting there going, what the fuck are you talking about? Do you have anything made of poison that I could give to a journalist expecting someone to laugh?
Oh, God. And then there's obviously some other ones. There was a photo of him that I found from like high school that is very elderly millennial. And then I didn't even know this. It was a cropped photo, but the original photo is him in a men's locker room with women pissing in a urinal. So weird.
Yeah. So it's great because at one point he was in the bathroom with all kinds of people. And nowadays that would be fuel for the political fire against him.
It's so fucking strange.
He looks so, I don't know, it's clearly some kind of a high school worked up bit, but he looks like an awkward guy that like, whose clothes don't fit, and it looks like he walked into the wrong bathroom, and he's like, oh, girls in here.
Yeah, he's clearly not in on the bit. He's clearly not in on it.
Was this like a weird yearbook photo, like a 2-page spread for the yearbook?
Something like that. I don't really remember, but
that's what it looks like the framing of it, but the content of it makes me think it couldn't be. Have you read any of the stuff about his Spotify account? What he listens to?
No, I haven't. This is even more cringe.
So, I mean, to me, it's cringe because it's not mostly stuff. It's not shit that I would listen to, but it's very millennial music. So what's he listening to? This is his running playlist. Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, The Strokes, a lot of Strokes on here. The Dandy Warhols, The Lumineers, a lot of Death Cab for Cutie. About 6 Death Cab for Cutie songs on his running list.
This is very millennial.
He's like, you know, that guy you knew, like, when we would have been in high school, maybe a little later, a dumbass, like, frat guy who kind of, like, was like, yeah, I like some weird stuff, and they mean, like, bad indie. Like, they mean, like, Death Cab for Cutie, but they feel like, because the rest of their friends are such knuckle draggers, they feel like that makes them really fucking quirked up.
Yeah.
Also, who the fuck runs to Death Cab for Cutie? How do you run to I Will Follow You into the Dark?
Brian, I think he was just a really big fan of the show Scrubs and also Zach Braff's music taste. I think that's probably why.
Well, yeah, he learned. That's true. He was watching Scrubs and he'd hear us because I knew so many guys like that in high school who were like, "Oh, this is a pretty cool song. It's actually pretty sensitive." And I learned about it from the sitcom.
As an avid Scrubs watcher as a teenager.
Yeah, I've seen much of it. I've seen a lot of it. It was a fine sitcom of the time. Very of the time. Hasn't aged well.
Very, very of its time. Really the only thing I think Zach Braff was ever good in. Other than that, Zach Braff has been garbage in everything he's made or been in pretty much.
So I don't want to derail too much. I don't think Zach Braff is, in retrospect, very good in that show. I think it's a good sitcom with a good cast and some funny jokes. But first of all, if you watched it now, Taylor, I guarantee you would be annoyed by how soy it was and how millennial it was. I actually have, and I agree. And I'm not saying it's still, sitcoms are annoying products of their time. It's fine. But also, he's the most boring cast member in that show if you watch it now. I'm trying to find, because I swear I saw another Vance playlist where he had Brand New on it, and I thought that was so awesome.
Well, Brian, we're getting into Scrubs a little bit. I have one quick digression here, but I was remembering a PSA ad campaign. Of course, we know the R word, or I'm just going to say it, retarded, because that's a word that's now become pretty popular in vernacular again. Millennials tried to kill it pretty much, and Zoomers brought it back from the seams of it.
I say it, but I know I probably shouldn't. It's not nice.
Same. Yeah, totally. But I remember a PSA from years ago where Dr. Cox from Scrubs, who I think his kid is intellectually disabled or something.
Yes.
And I remember this PSA was really funny. Is I've called JD many things on the show, and then he goes over all the female names.
No.
There's one thing I've never called him. I've never called him retarded. No, I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious.
Well, okay, I don't.
The word retarded or the R word is very offensive. Don't say it. I'm that's awesome.
I don't want to be a dick about this because John C. McKinley, you are right. In real life, his son is intellectually.
I think he has Down syndrome, maybe.
Down syndrome. Well, but he has that. Whatever. I was just trying to think of it's Downs, but I was trying to think of what the appropriate thing to say was, since it's a real person, and he's done a lot of advocacy, pretty serious advocacy work. So that's cool of John C. McKinley is looking out for his son and all these other people, all these other kids especially. But why do that ad in character? I guess now I'm getting in my own head.
No, I don't think it was quite in character. He was doing it in the cadence, but he wasn't doing it in
Okay. But even so, I think as I'm working through this by talking about it out loud, I figured it out. It's because it was aimed at kids. Because who was the audience watching Scrubs? It was people who are our age, right? Who were 12, right?
Yeah, essentially, maybe early to older teenagers probably would be the most.
I've called him Pinhead, Sally. I mean, he's probably called Zach Braff's character things that were at least as offensive as the R word in that show. If we watch,
he absolutely called him a tranny at some point. You know that for a fact. You know that. I would have to look it up, but I guarantee you that.
Yeah, maybe that's one of those shows, and I'm not. First of all, if we watched it now, the soyness of it would drive us crazy, but it would be second only to that 70s show in being a show that you'd watch now and go, ooh.
Well, in my opinion, I think that 70s show is even more cringe because, there's convicted rapists and convicted rape defenders on that show. A lot of them.
And I rewatched a few years ago. So I watch a lot of sitcoms. We've talked about that sometime we're going to do we're going to figure out a way to do a sitcom throughout the generations kind of mini series. If we can work out, I got to think on the logistics of it. But I rewatched some of that 70s show and it was pretty heinous.
It was pretty heinous. I tried rewatching a little bit of it at one point. I'm like, oh my God, this is offensive.
Nasty.
This is
nasty.
By the way, a show is fucked up when the only cast member actually from Wisconsin is the most normal person.
Was that Kirkland?
Yeah, it was the dad. It was the dad.
All right.
Although he was apparently only born in Wisconsin, but he mostly was raised in California. But either way, he was technically from Wisconsin. So I'll take that.
Is he a Scientologist?
No, he was not. I think he was one of the only people on the show who wasn't a Scientologist.
I think him and Topher Grace.
Yeah, Topher Grace is pretty close to being the most normal, although he was in Spider-Man 3, so I think we can make him
Which is as bad as being a Scientologist, yeah.
I think so. But, speaking of things that aren't as bad as Scientology, let's get into some of the details of this film here. So, once again, this is Bob Roberts. It came out in 1992, and the first trivia fact I have here, and we're going to certainly talk about this, but this was Jack Black's very first movie, which I think is very interesting. He was a commercial actor before then, but this was his very first TV film role. I know last week we talked about his amazing portrayal as fucking Minecraft, whatever the fuck.
Oh, yeah.
The Minecraft movie.
He's really come full circle from playing basically a Hitler Youth character here to hiring his longtime friend for making a joke about Donald Trump.
Yeah, he went from fucking youth far right to Minecraft Steve in 32 years. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, man.
And
The thing is, I love Jack Black. That Tenacious D shit really pissed me off.
nah, it sucks. I'm gonna be real here. That was what a fucking coward. And by the way, that was the
Just
thing
a
that probably
pussy.
the majority of Americans thought, or at least
Well,
found funny.
it also was a joke. Like, I'm sorry, it was just like, oh, why'd you miss? Like, who cares?
And also, by the way, the fact that his poll numbers didn't go up at all after 2 assassination attempts
Yeah.
shows that most Americans probably agreed with
Yeah,
him.
did not care. Exactly.
And speaking of, this movie was rated R. And the next trivia fact I had here is a soundtrack album was actually due for release on Warner Brothers, but it was not released because Tim Robbins didn't want the songs played outside of the movie's context, which makes sense because the songs in this movie are like great original songs for this type of movie, but they're like heinously evil ideologically.
Yep. Smart move, because this movie gets explicit about it being fascist, but the kind of the undercurrent of it is like this faux subversiveness of fascism, which that's exactly what would have happened. Because the songs in this movie are good, they're like well written, and they're funny because they're evil and they're tongue in cheek, but that would shine through outside of the movie. They would have been adopted by a certain
100%.
type of like, quote unquote ironic right winger.
So good on you, Tim Robbins. You probably missed out on a couple bucks, but still good on you, Tim Robbins. And then speaking of, this movie was directed and written by him, and this was actually Tim Robbins' film directorial debut. He would later be known for being in fucking Shawshank just a few years later, arguably one of the greatest films of all time. I mean, I think it's one of the greatest films of all time.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It's not my favorite film, but it is undeniably a classic film.
If you ever need like a thing to talk about with like the normies at your job, if they're talking about movies, you can always like pivot the conversation to like Goodfellas or Shawshank, and it's a movie that is good that everyone will agree on.
I would say, The Godfather too, but it insists upon itself, so I would never.
What does that even mean? What does that even mean? It has a valid point to make. That's why it's insisting.
Yeah. One of the only good Family Guy bits. That's a pretty funny bit in my opinion.
So we're going to go on another millennial digression. Because I'm working all the time lately, I watch a lot of 2000s animation after work when I'm in bed, filling out job applications or, other millennial things. And not for the show or anything. I just watch a lot of animation from the 2000s because I'm mentally ill. And I've been rewatching American Dad and Family Guy. Pretty good bits. It's a bad show, but like there's good jokes.
Oh, no, 100%. Yeah, Seth MacFarlane is somebody who I think misses a lot of the time, but he certainly can hit. That is for fucking sure.
It's what it reminds me of, I guess, it's like the Monty Python thing, where there's so many jokes per minute that like a certain number of them are going to land. And if 5 jokes in a row kind of suck, that's fine because there's 10 more coming up.
Yeah. And then this movie was produced by Forrest Murray and Tim Robbins. I'm just going to fucking speed through these because he's just well known for being in so much shit. But he was in such movies as The Sure Thing, Howard the Duck, arguably the greatest movie.
I just watched it for the first time.
It's fucking awesome, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. I'll just say that, but it's awesome.
It really is. Usually when people say it's such a bad movie, the worst movie, they're like normies, and it's like a not great movie, but it's kind of whatever. Or it's like interesting and people don't like it. Howard the Duck legit is as bad as people say.
Yeah, it's not a great movie. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's just, that was definitely a very early George Lucas L. I'll just say that. Which is not a good movie.
A taste of things to come.
Exactly. Oh, jeez. And then he was also in Top Gun, Bull Durham, Jacob's Ladder, Jungle Fever, of course, this movie, Shawshank Redemption, as I mentioned, Dead Man Walking, Austin Powers 2, The Spy Who Shagged Me, High Fidelity, Mr. Griver, Anchorman, War of the Worlds, The Green Lantern, and obviously many more I didn't list on here. And he's also been on such TV shows as Saint Elsewhere. That was his very first acting role ever, was on Saint Elsewhere.
Aww.
He was on a few episodes of The Simpsons, Portlandia, I know Brian's favorite show that very much accurately represents Portland. And he's also on the main cast of the Apple TV show The Silo, which Matt Christman, before he had a stroke, listed as the most AI-generated show of all time, which...
Oh, no.
I don't know if that's true anymore. I think there's more AI-generated content now than there was 2 or 3 years ago. I'm going to be honest.
Well, yeah.
And then Forrest Murray hasn't really been involved in a whole lot, but I wanted to put a couple of his credits here. So his very first film he ever worked on was The Prowler, which is a really great early slasher film. I don't know if you ever saw that one, Brian, have you?
No, actually, I'm familiar with it. It's been on my list for a while. Like, I can picture, like, the poster art in my head and shit. But yeah, I've never watched it.
It's very good. It's directed by Frank Zito, who directed Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. I would say
the best
inarguably
one.
the best one. Yep, the best one. Easily the best one. Also,
yes.
Of course, our good friend of the pod, Corey Feldman, kills Jason in that movie.
Yeah, no, it's a great Corey performance. I'm going to say, to me, far and away the best film in the series. The first 4 films are all good in that series. Anyone that says Friday the 13th sucks doesn't know what they're talking about. That's a good series.
They're all classic horror films. I mean, the first 4 at least. I mean, definitely in the latter half of that series, there's a lot of stinkers in there.
Your mileage may vary, but those first 4 are, I don't know. My philosophy is always that when you're watching those, you have to treat Jason. They're not meant to be scary. They're like monster films. So you're not watching it to feel terror. You're watching it to see the monster, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And, speaking of seeing the monster, he also produced a few Dennis Leary specials. I would argue maybe Hollywood's biggest monster. And this movie is 104 minutes long. It had a budget of $3.9 million and it grossed $8 million. So I think it technically made it a box office success, but not by very much. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 93% critic score and a 78% audience score. So, of course, both critics and audiences like this film. And I can certainly see why. It's a low budget movie, but it's very well made before we get into the synopsis here.
Yeah, it's funny. This is a relic of a time. I opened up the episode by saying that I don't think this movie would exist anymore. And I know there are people that would argue that that's not true. But one of the things we come back to, Taylor, on this podcast, right, is, of course, the base lib thing, but also just the idea that in the past, there seems to have been this genuine belief in the power of art to bring positive change. Usually it comes from kind of like, of course, with Bulworth and, when we talk about Warren Beatty in general, we talk about that. This guy who had the money, who had the influence and the resources, and was like, I'm going to say something. I'm going to educate people. And that doesn't really exist anymore. We do get kind of politics in mainstream movies. We get like the Marvel the liberal politics and the Barbie shit. And I'm not even downing anyone if you like that or it speaks to you, but it's not really the same as making a movie like Bob Roberts or Bulworth, where you're saying like, I'm going to unambiguously tell people how fucked up the world is, because I believe that if people know that, it will make a difference. I think everything's a bit more jaded now. Maybe people were wrong, people like Tim Robbins and Warren Beatty, to think they could do that, but I think it's admirable that it won't. Or, Tom Laughlin. It seems like that's a trend that's kind of gone in movies now. Now even the politics in a movie has been, kind of steamrolled. It's been, market tested. But at some point there was a faction of people in Hollywood that were saying like, we're going to make this movie to tell people something because we believe it will have a net positive for the country. Maybe naive, but kind of interesting that it was even being attempted at one point.
Brian, I would agree with that. But Jon Stewart recently tried doing that with his fucking amazing movie, Irresistible. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't, but I read about it. And I like Jon Stewart. We've talked about this on the podcast. I think he is an elder millennial icon, truly. But I thought it looked bad. Sounded bad. It looked fucking terrible. It looked like a movie that honestly he wrote in like 2005 and just for whatever reason it got shelved for 15, 20 years before it finally came out. From everything I've read about it, it seems like a movie that is just decades behind the times in the worst way possible. It's anachronistic in the worst way possible. But, speaking of things that are not anachronistic necessarily, let's get into our synopsis here. So the movie takes place in Pennsylvania in 1990. It depicts a fictitious senatorial race between a conservative Republican folk singer, Bob Roberts, played by Tim Robbins, and the incumbent Democrat, Brickley Paste, played by Gore Vidal. Now, that was an interesting one. Yeah, I remember when I was watching this movie, and I watched it twice this week now, I went, oh shit, that's Gore Vidal. And I just, every time I saw him, I thought, like, Gore Vidal is in this movie.
I mean, honestly, the only other thing I really know him from was when not Keith Buckley. That's the singer of Every Time I Die.
Yeah,
but the other Buckley that I'm thinking of threatened to punch him in the face and called him a queer because Gore Vidal called him a crypto-fascist. Do you remember that?
No, I don't. I'm looking it up right now, as a matter of fact.
It is hilarious.
I didn't know. Yeah, I've never seen Gore Vidal in a movie before. I've never seen him like act before, to be honest.
Yep, it was Gore Vidal and Buckley, not Keith Buckley, once again.
I've heard that Best of Enemies is very good. This documentary.
It's fascinating. I only saw a couple minutes of it, mostly just the one where Buckley is threatening to punch him in the face and he calls him a queer.
Wouldn't it be awesome if Gore Vidal called Keith Buckley from Every Time I Die?
Yeah! This film is shot through the perspective of Terry Manchester, played by the actor Brian Murray, a British documentary filmmaker who is following the Roberts campaign. Through Manchester's lens, we see Roberts travel across the state and sing about drug users, lazy people, and the triumph of traditional family values and laissez-faire capitalism over the rebellious and social justice causes of the 1960s. And, we were talking about a lot of these songs are really well made. Like, obviously, they sound great. me, the lyrics are just so on the nose, like making fun of like just sort of reactionary, like shitty folk country, like pop music, or not pop music, folk music and like country music.
Yeah.
Just like, oh my God. And like, don't get me wrong, a lot of people have this idea that like country music was always woke or whatever. I don't really buy that. Just like when people say punk was always woke, which is never really true. But I will say though, the 90s was the time though when country music went from a potential populist, like left turns, just completely far right drivel.
Yeah.
Like, so honestly.
So the thing with both the punk has always been leftist, the country's always been a woke thing, is that people are like, they're retconning it to make it a thing they want it to be. And that's always been part of all these popular genres, but that's not what they are inherently. With the 90s, it's definitely the time where you see country, you know, there's all these different threads of country going through, you know, the American century. You've got your outlaw country and you've got pop country and you've got this folk country and things. But in the 90s, it all kind of filters up together into this loud, kind of raunchy, garish type of rock music that culminates in Toby Keith and his fucking Boot in Your Ass song. And what that all shares with the Bob Roberts songs is not much because they're stylistically pretty different, but these songs do have the type of like milquetoast kind of like warming a scared spirit type lyrics. Because that's what this is all about. There are songs that people could listen to that would make a scared reactionary feel safe, right?
No, 100%. And I definitely want to get into some of the lyrics at the tail end when all the fucking plot stuff goes, because some of these lyrics are fucking wild to listen to. Although, to be fair, these were a lot of things people genuinely believed in the 80s and 90s. So
yeah, these are just talking points that you'd hear. These are like things you'd hear your dumb, like, relatives say.
Yeah, and I mean, just a year after this movie came out, fucking Clinton voters would say the same fucking thing, too. I mean...
Yeah, that's actually one of the depressing things about this movie is that it's based lip stuff, it's cool, but it does sort of present, you know, the Democrat, Republican, I guess, like binary. And, you know, a year after this, you'd get Clinton in office, running off his, like, tough on crime platform, you know? So
no, 100%.
They may have missed the mark a little bit on that.
No, I agree. And they also make Brickley Pace like kind of like a fucking like George McGovern like Democrat. But like, let's be honest, in the 90s, there weren't really any senators like that anymore.
Yeah, no.
Like, feels very anachronistic. All the Democrats were all complete war hawks and like defense fucking corporation stooges at that point. There weren't like, George McGovern had long since retired, okay?
Well, and that is, of course, what makes Bulworth the superior base lib film, is that it exists in that reality.
Yeah, and actually, I think this is like, and not say that this movie doesn't have a lot of good qualities, obviously. This is a very good movie. But this is very much a blueprint for Bulworth. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Even though the Roberts campaign team officially avoids manifestations of open bigotry, their songs, speech, and mannerisms are rife with snobbish dog whistles and racist and sexist innuendos. And Manchester's footage reveals casual use of homophobic slurs among various other things that, and I also love, like, the longer the movie goes, just the more, like, heinous the things Bob Roberts says on camera are. It's awesome. Like, the dog whistles just aren't even there anymore. Like, at the very end of the movie, he says, "Oh, don't do crack. That's a ghetto drug." And I'm like, damn. And then complementing Manchester's neutral perspectives are reflections by Senator Pace, TV anchor Kelly Noble, played by the actress Lynn Thigpen, and investigative reporter Bugs Raplin, played by Giancarlo fucking Esposito, one of the greatest TV actors of all time. I mean, he was amazing as Gus Fring in Breaking Bad. I know, Brian, you'll never watch Breaking Bad.
I won't. The more you reference it, the less I want to watch it.
Yeah, but I will say, though, even if you never watch it, though, Giancarlo Esposito as Gus Fring is great in that TV show, but his Spanish is fucking horrendous. Like, straight up, his Spanish is like gringo-level Spanish. It's awesome.
Respect him for learning it, I guess, or trying to say it.
Obviously respect 100%. But anyways, Pace is convinced that Roberts is a master manipulator linked to the National Security Council, the CIA, and the military-industrial complex. Throughout the campaign, Raplin attempts to use the documentary being made about Roberts to expose him to the public as a fraud, connected to the anti-drug charity Broken Dove. And I also think this is very interesting, right? Because obviously the base lib thing, there's definitely I don't know if quasi-conspiratorial is quite the right word, because there's a lot of conspiracy stuff that was absolutely true about Iran-Contra and like CIA drug running and stuff like that. But like, that was definitely a base lib thing that definitely phased out of the based lib thing over the years. Like, became like conspiracy based lib, and then eventually just became regular based lib, and then eventually all the libs now don't even think that like Epstein killed him. Like, they think Epstein killed himself now.
I kind of think that not following the conspiracy brain trail a little more, because conspiracy theory used to be kind of up in the air. Conspiracy theories were all over the map. They're left wing and right wing, and also just ones that were kind of outside of that sphere, right? And there were a number of like people on the left and even just liberals who would follow a certain type of like conspiratorial mindset because of things we'd seen in history. And I feel like now, because none of them want to look crazy, they all step back from all of that, which has, I think,
they're like, yeah, I'm not a Trumper. And they like
yeah,
adjust
exactly.
their fucking shirt collar.
And so they just don't want to ask questions about like anything, you know?
Yeah. Listen, you're telling me that Epstein didn't kill himself? That's not true. He definitely killed himself. Now I gotta go back, and I was gonna make a cuck joke, but I'm not gonna say that. But also his campaign manager, Lucas Hart III, played by Alan Rickman, rest in peace, another great actor. There's so many amazing fucking character actors in this movie.
Rickman's great in this.
And he was also in the Phoenix program. Shortly after an acerbic and disastrous interview with Roberts, Kelly Noble points out that his potential for success comes from subverting stereotypes by using his music, a tool of protest typical of the left during the counterculture years, as a vector for postmodern far-right politics. And there we go. Far-right people love co-opting leftist, like, iconography and art and making it fucking violent and fascist. They love doing that shit. Like 100%. They're culture vultures.
What's interesting about this, and this doesn't directly relate to Bob Roberts, but are you familiar with the neo-folk movement, primarily in England? Do you know about neo-folk?
I know, is it Death in June? Is that a band
Death
that's
in
involved
June.
with that?
Death in June, Boyd Rice, Current 93. I mean, to be honest, some pretty great music's come from that scene. It evolves out of like post-punk and industrial music and all this shit. And it is, I mean, I'm sure now that it's been around longer, there's more kind of diversity in ideology, but it is this heavily like cryptic, not crypto-fascist, but cryptically fascist, like English folk tradition. And one of the things with the right co-opting leftist trends in general that you'll see is that it's couched in all of these conflicting like vernaculars and aesthetics that confuse people, and you kind of have to have a certain pretty deep level of familiarity with the language of both the left and right to even recognize it. And I was thinking about that watching this, because to most people, if they see a guy with an acoustic guitar singing songs about society, they're gonna think, like in America, I do think most people think that's a guy that's talking about me, he's talking for me, because they've been programmed to see that person that way. And these are very, like, as far as the sound of these folk songs that the Bob Roberts character sings, they're very traditional folk. They're very Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie-esque folk, just with monstrous lyrics.
No, 100%. That was definitely the thing I noticed too, obviously, is that he's very much doing, very much a nostalgic pastiche of that, obviously, like 40s and 50s, like folk.
Yeah, like aesthetically, like the jokes in the movie reference Bob Dylan because he's the most famous folk singer at the time. But the actual like milieu that Bob Roberts is co-opting is a much deeper like Americana vein of that, which I do think like that's why these songs would have been adopted by the right, because even though they're tongue-in-cheek, even though they're parodic, they would be effective. This movie doesn't get too much into that, but after the interview scene, we get Noble talking about the idea of the rebel reaction and kind of what a brilliant ruse that is. And I think part of it's because it confuses people, because it's contradictory. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but there are things in this movie that I think you can directly correlate to like the fake populism of like Donald Trump.
No, 100%. And once we get to a certain scene, a lot of people wanted to rewatch this movie because of a very specific recent Donald Trump thing, or I should say very recent Donald Trump events. But
does Bob Roberts get blown by Laura Loomer?
Yes, he just gets fucking domed, just top, just sloppy.
That's a great scene in the movie where Tim Robbins' eyes are rolling back in his head while he gets fucking blown by a witch.
By the way, though, do you think Laura Loomer is the best at giving head or the worst? I think she's the worst at giving head. I don't think there's any way she's good at it. I'm going to be honest with you.
I mean, I don't think Trump enjoys sex is the thing. I think he's largely non-sexual, and that's why when he talks about sex, it's all kind of a power exercise. Like the grab him on the pussy thing, the things he told Ivanka to say about his penis to their friends, when she wanted her to make up stories about his dick being like so big, it was like a third leg. Like it has nothing to do with pleasure. It has nothing to do with enjoying intimacy. It's literally all I do.
It's all about a gross power dynamic and controlling. That's
the pissing on the Obama's bed, which I still don't get. It's just such a strange non-sexual thing to do with a prostitute.
Let me have prostitutes piss on a bed that I have to sleep on later. Like, what the fuck?
But I'm gonna say, like, Lumar's probably bad at giving top just because she's like a right winger, and it just seems like a lot of them are confused about the mechanics of sex. But to be fair, a lot of people are bad at giving head, you know.
Do you actually, I don't know if this is the thing you remember, but I very vividly remember it just talking about it right now. But there was like a video of Laura Loomer like trying to pick up a guy at a club. And he's like, oh, you're hot. And he's like, what are you? And she's like, oh, I'm Jewish. And I'm like, oh, he's like, I don't know about that. And then she's like, oh, no, you don't understand. I have big Khazar milkers. She literally said that too.
Oh, that's hot. That's so hot. Frank Zappa's song Jewish Prince was written about Laura Loomer.
Well, speaking of people who aren't Jewish princesses, as the campaign continues, Pace remains in the lead until a scandal arises involving him and a young woman who was seen emerging from a car with him. Pace claims that she was a friend of his granddaughter whom he was driving home, but he cannot shake the accusations. Knowing any Democrat, that is 100% not true. I think he was absolutely hooking up with some jailbait. I 100% believe that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that does date this movie, I think, is that in reality, if that surfaced, it would probably be a reasonable question to ask, given just Democrats' track record in recent decades.
100%. Robert's campaign suffers a setback as well when Raplin's accusations briefly gain traction and result in a subpoena on Lucas Hart for unpaid housing loans rumored to be directed to drug trafficking. Now, I actually really do like that level of like, we're talking about the conspiracy stuff, but like, Iran Contra, which by the way, fucking Ronald Reagan was pretty much convicted of, well, no, it wasn't him. It was, who the fuck was it? Who was the guy that did it?
It was Ollie North.
Ollie North, that's it.
Ollie North.
Ollie North, 100%. I don't know why he said
Ollie North.
Yeah, for a second I thought Ollie North, or it was I was thinking of Ollie Sykes from Bring Me the Horizon, but he absolutely had nothing to do with it. If anything, he would have used all the drugs himself. It would have never been.
There would have been none to traffic.
They would have like opened up the cargo, and he's just got like a fucking like giant
Scooby-Doo with his belly
yeah.
just huge.
What happened to the drugs? Oh, I don't know, mate. I don't know what happened to the drugs. Like. I did an Australian. He's British. I shouldn't do that. That's very offensive. It's very racist
same thing.
against British people. Yeah, same thing. Oh, Jesus Christ. By the way, Brian, we are absolutely going to review every Bring Me the Horizon album on the show at some point, and you're going to love it.
I mean, eventually we're going to probably have to review at least one, because we've now made a trend of talking about kind of like the eras and evolutions of like heavy music and hardcore. So I feel like it would be appropriate to. You've also threatened to bring in the Punk Goes series,
which, by the way, I would never do unless we both agreed to it. I would never be like, this week we're going to do Punk Goes. But
I would do that. I'm just saying I would really not enjoy it.
No, it would be like fucking The Wall or fucking Make America Great Again, where it'd be something we would just both vehemently hate. Like, it just All right, and after our amazing conspiratorial drug rant, let's get back into the synopsis here. As the election approaches, Roberts is asked to appear on a network's sketch comedy show, which I think is very interesting because apparently, I did not know this, but I did see there was an SNL sketch about Bob Roberts, but apparently you said the Bob Roberts sketch was first?
Yeah, so the Bob Roberts sketch was first, but I couldn't find any confirmation of this. I would not call this an SNL movie, and I know I explained to you why. First and foremost, not a Lorne Michaels production. Secondly, I think Tim Robbins may have brought this concept to SNL. I don't think...
That's my guess too, honestly.
Because I watched the sketch, and I watch a good amount of 90s SNL. It's one of the things I put on as background noise. It's my favorite era of the show, is the early to mid 90s. And when you watch the Bob Roberts SNL sketch, it's pretty tonally different from other SNL of the era. I think that Robbins was probably already working on this movie. He probably already knew he was going to make it, and he wanted to do a practice run or even just do some promo. And it's a very short sketch. It's like a 4-minute sketch or something. And he was hosting, and he was just like, let me do this thing, you know? So technically, the SNL sketch featuring the Bob Roberts character is the originator of this character, but I don't really think that's, I think the film was already being conceived in some level.
That would be my guess too, because you're right. This is definitely not an SNL style character. And the SNL sketch was, you're right, very, very different from the tone of this movie. Like, of course, SNL has obviously lambasted and also just frankly had on very reactionary figures in the past. But this is not an SNL movie. This is not Wayne's World. This is not Blues Brothers. This is like, they're totally completely different.
this is a very specific type of 90s satire that's very kind of in your face about what it's saying, and it is very ideologically driven. And I don't mean that in a bad way. That's a compliment to this movie. An SNL movie, even a political satire, probably wouldn't be quite like that. It would be a little more muddled and have some tacked on sentimentality. The real answer is, of course, like I said, Lorne Michaels didn't produce this. It's not an SNL movie.
When Roberts announces that he will not be playing the song he had originally proposed, a dispute breaks out between the cast and producers of the show. This new song turns out to be nothing more than a thinly veiled campaign endorsement, and an angry staff member of the network pulls the plug mid-performance. Now, obviously this is a movie, but at the same time, if this actually happened, why would you expect him to do anything other than a campaign fucking video at the end of it?
Exactly.
A musician and entertainer, that's what he's going to fucking do.
So the conceit of the movie, right, is that this is a comedy sketch show. It's called Cutting Edge. The original host and guest lined up for the show is KRS-One. So we can presume that this is a very edgy, progressive Gen X program that Bob Roberts' team has finagled and screwed KRS-One out of a gig to get him on here. That's kind of what we were led to take from this. So there's already tension between Roberts and the cast of this show. But I agree with you. I had the same thought. Why is him doing a campaign song? Is it really worse than he says he was originally going to do a song about drugs, smoking? What does he say? It's some nonsense.
Drugs are for losers or something like
drugs
that.
Drugs are for losers. And it's like, well, okay, how is doing an anti-drug song in 1990 or doing a war on drugs song, which is what it would have been, is that better than doing a campaign? I don't know. It's just, I mean, I like the scene. We're kind of splitting hairs here, but there are a couple of things in this movie where that just kind of, I always wonder like, oh, why did it take this for that to happen? Having said that, it's actually one of the better songs in the movie. It sounds very authentically like a fascist anthem.
That's the one, right, where it's like a lynching song for like drug users. Which, by the way, do you think that fucking Carl Buchner listened to this and he's like, damn, this is lit? Then he wrote Firestorm.
So, if only. The thing with fascist art in general, even, self-aware fascist art, is that if it's good, if it captures the emotions of fascists, because, like, there is something artistically valuable in exploring, like, the reactionary mind, right? And there is some nuance there, and there are these torrid emotions, and there are some pretty universal emotions that lead people to become that. So, this song is the best example of, if this soundtrack had been released, I absolutely agree with Tim Robbins that these songs would have been co-opted, because what do you see fucking far-right people singing? They sing Tomorrow Belongs to Me, like a self-aware song made to criticize them for cabaret. They just full-on have adopted it because it captures their feeling and their emotion, and it stirs them in their wretched little souls. And that's kind of the vibe of this song. I don't know if it's the nastiest song in the film, because a lot of the songs here are just mean-spirited, but this to me is kind of the darkest moment in the film, because the song he's playing, again, it appeals to people's emotion and their kind of fear, and it's kind of pretty sounding. Do you know what I mean?
No, for sure, yeah.
And that's the fascist art that you need to watch out for, right? Is the stuff that's good. It is the stuff where you can hear it and start to think like, oh, this is touching some primal fear in me,
Yeah, 100%. Like, a lot of fascist art doesn't do that, but the stuff that does, you're right, you should very much be wary of, for sure.
Well, that's what, right? It's the distinction between Death in June and Screwdriver, right? Like,
yeah. No, very much so. As Roberts is leaving the studio, he is seemingly shot by a would-be assassin. Raplin, who has been causing shooting problems for the campaign, is initially linked to the shooting, but he is later cleared when it is found that due to constricted palsy in his right hand, he physically could not have fired the gun. Following the incident, Raplin contends that Roberts was never actually shot and that the gun was fired into the ground. Raplin's allegations are not confirmed on camera by Roberts' campaign member, Dolores Peregrue, played by Rebecca Jenkins, when she questioned by Manchester, but she does show clear sign of remorse and abruptly quits the campaign. And interestingly enough, actually, so that is the thing that I think brought this movie back to a lot of people, is the fake assassination attempt, which is revealed later on, spoilers, that it was a fake assassination attempt. But, we've talked about conspiracies. There's a really dumb conspiracy theory about, especially the first recent Trump assassination attempt, not the second one, which I think could have very easily been fake, because the guy behind that one is even more politically fucking weird than the first one.
So it would make sense to me, right, if the second one was fake, fake because the first one happened. The Trump camp expects to get this Reagan-esque boost, and then that doesn't happen, right?
Yep. But I've heard my coworkers say that the first one was fake, and I'm like, okay, first off,
my mom thinks it might have been. My mom is a total like base lib, like Gen X chick, and she very much suspects the first one was fake. I'm gonna say something. I don't think either of them are quote unquote fake.
Me neither.
But I think it was a 9/11 situation where maybe they allowed the second one to be carried out because
that guy's politics are so weird. Like it seems like a CIA op guy. Like that's what the second guy sounds like.
That's true. That's true. But how many people with your standard American, if you cracked open their brain and looked at their politics, are fucking weird. Right? They're completely incoherent. So that means nothing to me. Like
that's totally fair. But the thing with the first one is I've heard people be like, oh, well, he planned it so like the shot could do. And I'm like, first off, everybody on Trump's side are extremely incompetent. There's no way losers. They could have gotten some 20-year-old fucking weirdo with a bad face, which Felix, he has a very bad face and a bad head. But also, by the way, somebody who has such a marked shot that he was able to hit somebody's earlobe and miss. Yeah, exactly. That's insane. That is insane that anybody believes that's fake. Are you kidding me? I talked to my coworkers and they legitimately believed that he like faked him even getting hurt in the act. Like what? That's insane. I'm sorry. That is bullshit insanity.
I'm sorry. And I said the same thing to my mom and to other people at the time. I'm not putting it past the Trump team on a moral level or even saying they're not conniving enough. I'm just saying we've never seen them perform anything that competently ever.
No, they have fucking people like Rudy Giuliani. And just like, come on.
Yeah, just as a quick aside, I'd like to say that I enjoyed seeing a good character in this movie with policy. I feel like it's good representation for the policy community.
Exactly, for the CP. No, I'm not going there. No. But yes, very much so. And it's once again in a great character actor, Giancarlo Esposito. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's great in this.
Of course, he was in Do the Right Thing, very famously in that movie.
We're going to talk about Do the Right Thing.
At some point, for sure.
At some point.
For fucking sure, 100%.
This is another thing.
Oh yeah, sorry, Brian.
I don't know if it's a fault of this movie per se, but it is definitely a marker of a time that there was a belief for it seems like a few decades in Hollywood that like if we could just have a guy say the truth to the audience,
it would make very much a Bulworth thing. Very much a Bulworth thing. Also, obviously, Tom Laughlin and Billy Jack was another great example of that.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think that's cool to believe, but I think for that to work and to be enjoyed, the audience has to already be on board, because if they're not, they're going to take whatever they want out of it. Like, I mean, like you could be, I bet there are people who are probably on the political spectrum, like right libertarians, that could watch Bob Roberts and they would just project what they wanted onto it and think it was for them,
100%. Yeah, this is I wouldn't say super politically malleable movie. Like, obviously, American standard conservatives wouldn't like this movie. And trust me, when we get to the Amazon reviews, they have some opinions of this movie because, honestly, Brian, the people who commented on this are some of the most fascinating I've ever seen. They're fucking
Tim
awesome.
Robbins is a communist.
Oh boy, Brian, get ready. But just to finish off the plot synopsis here. So, the campaign is boosted by public support following the assassination attempts. And Robert wins the election with 52% of the vote. Although Robert's claims that his wounds have left him paralyzed from the waist down, he is seen tapping his feet at a celebration party. While Terry Manchester is interviewing Robert's supporters outside the new senator's hotel, a boy runs up shouting, "He's dead. They got him." When Manchester asks what they're talking about, the boy shouts, "Bugs Raplin. He's dead." And essentially, he was assassinated by a far-right guy. Movie ends with basically the news talking about it. They talk also about like the coalition invasion of Iraq in the 90s, not in the 2000s, but they also had a very interesting one where on the news they're talking about Saddam Hussein is only a month away from getting a nuclear weapon. And I'm like, oh my God, they were doing this shit in the 90s?
Jesus.
Oh man.
It's dark. It feels bad. Honestly, to see.
The 2000s were a sequel of the 90s in a lot of ways because, there was a World Trade Center terrorist attack in the 90s. Yeah. There was an Iraqi invasion in the fucking 90s.
The truth is, you've really said, I think, a very relevant thing for the whole podcast, actually, and for where we're at right now. So the 90s, that's our end of history. So there's a war in Iraq, but nothing really happens. We don't see it. We don't feel the negative ramifications of it or the positive ramifications, really. There's a World Trade Center attack, but it's like a dud. Nothing happens again. We're at the end of history. Cold War is over. We're done. The 2000s come in, and now all of that bad will that we've accrued over the last 10 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, it seeps into our culture. It like poisons us at the root. And that's what the 2000s was that poison festering into the roots. And then, 20 years later, look where we are now.
Yeah, fucking Jesus. And then just clarifying here, the film ends with a radio news report about Raplin's death at the hands of, once again, a right-wing fanatic, and a shot of Manchester standing in the Jefferson Memorial looking at the words, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." That's also an amazing, by the way, ending for a based lib movie. Like,
yeah,
we need to go back to the days of Thomas Jefferson, and they just have a Thomas Jefferson quote.
That's that thing, and it's a thing that you see with pretty much all liberals, from the cut to the based, and it's not necessarily good or bad, but it is this, it's the appeal to authority, which again, you do see Tim Robbins doing here, and I think that Gore Vidal's character in this film is kind of reflective of that. This idea that, like, there's a good authority, there's a good rule of law and decorum that has the best intentions, and we can move back towards it.
No, I 100% agree with that. But, speaking of having deference to authority, Brian, let's get into the authority of these Amazon reviews, because once again, Brian, these are incredible Amazon reviews.
Yeah, I'm excited for these ones, truly.
Some of the best I've seen in a long time, and also for the first time in a while that I haven't really done regularly, but I also looked into the profiles of some of these, and they're awesome.
Nice.
They're awesome. I have 3 profiles. 2 of them weren't interesting. I have 5 total reviews, but 3 of them were fascinating. Just an incredible mind palace of these 3 people. I think most of them are, 2 of them are positive and 1 are negative. So it's actually a pretty good mix of the 2. But our first Amazon review here is from Obi, who gives us 5 stars, and his profile
Obi
picture
Trace,
is...
real name, no gimmicks.
It's definitely an Obi-Wan reference, but the picture is of Qui-Gon Jinn, so they just got the character wrong. So
God damn
it. And the head of the review says...
That bodes well.
Oh, just get ready for... This one's my favorite Amazon person in a while. So it's probably Vicky Huffnagel. This is my favorite Amazon person since then.
Well, we got to check in on her.
I did recently, and there hasn't been any updates, unfortunately. But we will
reach out. I'll get her on the show.
Yeah, to clear the record. The review says, "This movie was profound when it was released," which I do agree with, but the body of the review gets into very interesting territory, I'll just say that. But the body of the review says, "Now it is almost as if this movie was a warning about how our country would look in 2004, a relevant look at how easily people can be manipulated in the political process and how easily we are divided into us and them."
This is making me sad.
Yeah.
Like, you're seeing this in 2004 and you're going, how far we've fallen. How dark.
By the way, most of these were like, this is very relevant for 2016, 2020, 2024, but this is the only one that I could find from 2004, which is also why I highlighted it.
This person, this Obi Qui-Gon Jinn guy, is not wrong, but it's just sad to think that in 2004, people were looking back at this film from 1990 and going, we're so bad now.
Bob Roberts, a son of a hippie couple, rebels against that worldview and uses music as a means of spreading conservative propaganda. That's also something we didn't mention in the synopsis. So Bob Roberts is the classic hippie to neocon pipeline.
Yeah. Well, so I actually wish the movie would have done a little more with that, because there's, I know I've talked quite a bit on this episode and in other episodes about, like, the weird nuances of what makes fascists identifiable or relatable to a certain type of person. The hippie to fash pipeline, there's a lot of reasons to exist. In this movie, though, it is kind of just presented right as Bob Roberts rebelling against his parents, taken to like an extreme. I might have liked it more if, personally, it might have been more interesting to me if Bob Roberts authentically was like a hippie child who grew into this through some weird bushwhacked trail, if that makes sense. Because there's a lot of weird shit on those hippie communes. If you ever read about that period in time, or even just like, RFK Jr.'s ties to weird environmentalists who were largely like hippies and then became, what they are now. And the movie kind of sidesteps that. It's more, I think, meant to be like an ironic twist, like, oh, actually, his parents were hippies.
No, yeah, they didn't really do a whole lot with it, and they barely talk to his, quote unquote parents in the movie either. It's something
his mom
that
looks so young.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing though, Brian, is that every mom in a movie back then was like 32 years old, because that's the
true.
oldest
That's
a woman
true.
in Hollywood could be. But
then they were Logan's runned out.
Yeah. He markets hate and intolerance in the flag. This movie frighteningly shows in fiction was being done in reality today. I think Bob Roberts will be a movie that historians will study 200 years from now and see it relevant for discussion of the United States, the turn of the millennium. I don't know if I agree with 200. Yeah, the world won't exist.
Yeah.
And I wanted to highlight this person's profile because it's amazing. This is incredible. The most 2000s based lib thing I've seen in a long time. But it starts with their yahoo.com username, and get ready for this, Brian. It is Western Lib Warrior at yahoo.com.
Yes!
Is where it can
Let's
be
go.
reached. I am an ex-Mormon and student of history. I consider myself a defender of American values and an opponent of right-wing religious tyranny. I'm a family man with a wonderful wife and 3 children. My extended family is almost all Mormon, and I descend from numerous polygamists. In the online world, I don't pull punches like I do in real life. Best regards.
Whoa!
You know what?
Yes!
I love this. This is a literal lib warrior and also like a new atheist guy. This is awesome.
The thing is, too, it's like, you can talk shit about that, but then you think, like, if this dude legit grew up Mormon, like a Mormon cult, like, I can hardly blame him. The best part is, I don't pull punches online like I do in real life. I'm not a simpering little bitch online like I am at my job.
This is the most 2000s person to ever exist. I love him. I love this guy. I hope he's still rocking.
Yeah, he got the exact same fucking Yahoo account.
Then our next review here is from Sammy Hoda, who gives us 5 stars. And the head of the review says, hilarious. It's kind of spelled like Hillary, but I don't think they meant it like that. I think they just had a typo in it.
Hillary's.
Yeah. And the body of the review says, I couldn't believe how funny this movie was, considering the fact it was a film about politics with none other, I think they meant none other, but they put none
others
than the anti-American pair of Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon. For someone from the right, this was an eye-opener into the psychodynamics of the confused liberal mind. This movie is incredibly funny in that at the same time, it is a left-wing critique of and an unwitting self-expose into how misunderstanding Robbins and the like are of conservatism. And I do not agree with that at all. I do not agree with that.
I don't know. Like, it's so funny to be like, Republicans were so starved for comedy in this era, because this is, of course, before the meme wars, which I do actually think the right adapted to quicker and better than the left, to be honest. So this is before that. So he's like, pretty funny movie. But everything they're saying about me, it's actually about themselves.
And by the way, Brian, this is one of the people whose profiles I wanted to highlight because this is amazing. They only have 11 reviews, but 3 of them are hilarious. One of them is a book by Bill O'Reilly that starts with, the Fox News Channel is probably the most important information gathering tool to come along since Gutenberg's printing press. And then the other 2 reviews, one of them is Alex Jones's, and it says, rock on, Alex. And the other one is also, the First Amendment is not recognized by Amazon. Sad. And the body of that review says,
what does that mean?
The Amazon Echo has banned Alex Jones InfoWars. Pretty lame, frowny face.
Pretty lame. I mean, okay, hang on. If you are a big Alex Jones anti-globalist guy, you shouldn't fucking want Amazon.
No.
Which is fine. Nobody should.
By the way, how misunderstanding of conservatism? You're very much misunderstanding conservatism, guy.
Yeah.
Or whoever the fuck you are, Sammy.
As a conservative, I don't trust all these corporations. Yeah, no shit.
But I'll use an Amazon Echo to listen to Alex Jones.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, wait, why do you have the Echo? It spies on you. It's collecting all your data and listening to all your conversations. Of course they don't want Alex on there. He's revealing them.
Oh, God, Jesus Christ. And then our next review here is from Duke Quran. It's not like Quran like the Islamic Quran, but it's spelled with a C. And they give it 5 stars. And the header of this review says, this movie is not to be taken seriously. That's also something I vehemently disagree with, but whatever, we'll get into it very shortly.
I mean, it is a comedy to some extent.
Yeah, but trust me, I got some opinions on that statement. But the body of the review says, people have written that this film bashes the right and gives praise to the left. If you look beneath the surface, you will see that this movie is a humorous political satire that pokes fun at both right-wing conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats. It really doesn't, actually.
No, it really does not.
Also, this film mustn't be taken so seriously. Its political undertones are only part of its comedic genius. So once again, we very much disagree with that first statement that he made. But also, I want to clarify real quick, though, right? Is that I bet you Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, who are both pretty equally involved in making this movie, would be pretty pissed off if you didn't want to take this film seriously.
You know what this is like? Is like when I was talking about Billy on the Billy Jack Facebook groups, and I said, how does everyone feel about Tom Laughlin portraying a native? And I was very, I'm a fan of those movies. I like Tom. I think they're good films. And a bunch of fucking boomers said, well, I like the movies. Like, let's keep politics out of it. What do you mean? That's what this person's like, hey, well, you can keep your politics out of this movie. That's not actually what it's about. Well, no, there's no reason to watch or enjoy this movie if you disagree with the politics. Like, I like the movie, but I wouldn't if I wasn't sympathetic to its worldview, because there's no reason to watch it otherwise. hilarious.
No, 100%. I totally agree with that. Like, and obviously he made the statement about this film also, pokes fun at Democrats, but obviously it really doesn't. But a movie that does do that is Bulworth, which I think makes Bulworth a better movie than this. Not that this is a bad movie, but Bulworth is definitely the better political satire, in my opinion.
I also think Bulworth is, in general, I mean, they're both liberal, ultimately, but it's a little more radical in the way it presents the issue,
No, totally, 100%. So, yeah, do Quran. You should maybe read the actual Quran, convert to Islam, and maybe you won't be this dumb. Maybe.
Yeah, no shit. But like both Taylor and I have.
Yes, exactly. Oh, man, I prayed 6 times to Mecca every day. That's how.
Well, I prayed 7, so...
Oh, shit. But talking about dumbasses, our next one here is from Stephen Travers, who gives us 2 stars. And the head of the review says, please. And the body of the review says, Bob Roberts was Tim Robbins' first foray into political filmmaking. He draws on his family experience as traveling folk singers and fashions a story of a conservative religious political candidate who sings family songs on the campaign trail. I don't know if a lot of those are family songs. I don't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they are presented as such.
Let's all go lynch our local drug user. Very family friendly. Although
that's like a hardcore band.
Yeah. The film itself is good stuff, well acted and produced, but the message is clear. White conservative Christians are just frauds and cannot be trusted. Well, I actually agree with that, but this person's obviously
of course.
One watches it and wonders what a truthful depiction of Jesse Jackson would look like, or an inside look at Joseph P. Kennedy pulling the strings in Jack's congressional and Senate campaigns, or the inside details
we're calling out Joe Kennedy?
Yeah, that kept Teddy Kennedy in office after Mary Jo Kopechne was killed. How about Al Sharpton and the Tawana Brawley incident? Bob Roberts is one of those movies that you just watch and shake your head. And you know what? Fair. There's definitely some liberal hypocrisy going on. But how about you make a fucking movie about it then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make your good movie about it.
Oh, God. And this person's profile I also want to highlight because a lot of these reviews are obviously just conservative bullshit. But one I really wanted to highlight here is we were talking about Buckley earlier. So one of the reviews for Bill Buckley book is Bill Buckley is a giant of intellect and a hero of the conservative movement. And neither of those things are true. None of that is true.
That's just made up. He just made that up.
And also he had a book of George W. Bush apparently wrote a book. And the head of the review says, Bush is an underrated Top Gun fighter jock. And like the review on here, I'm not going to go through the whole review, but this person genuinely believes that he was a war hero.
Oh, again, that's just made up.
Yeah, just the first sentence here. I finally read this book and did so in light of the mounting criticism of Bush as quote-unquote dumb, along with attempts to discredit his military career. He didn't have a military career. What the fuck are you talking about?
Which is fine.
But seriously, like, they're like, oh yeah, his very involved military experience, like flying in a plane once. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, if you want to say that about George H.W., like, okay, sure. He was in World War II and he was the only survivor in a fighter plane accident. Sure. But even John McCain had more experience than fucking George W.
Yeah, no, W literally, in what way did he serve? In what capacity?
He didn't even serve cunt. He didn't serve anything. He served us nothing. He ate nothing.
He ate nothing.
Oh, God. And speaking of people who should eat shit, so our very last review is from Gary, who gives this film 1 star. And the head of the review says, socialist dribble. And the body of the review says,
all right.
If you are a liberal or a socialist, pretty much any left-wing paranoiac, you will love this film. Its entire purpose seems to be that of putting on screen all the bile that spew from Robbins and Sarandon. Do yourself a favor and don't waste your time. And by the way, this is like a 25-year-old review, so people are still mad at Susan Sarandon 25 years ago.
People hate her so fucking much, and like libs hate her, and I know it's because they all hate Bernie or whatever. But like, what was so bad? Why does she get it so much worse than anyone else?
I mean, let's be honest, it's all misogyny at that point. Like, libs save their misogyny for left-wing women. Like,
for sure. They unload all of it.
Or also, to be fair, on a lot of right-wing women too, but definitely on left-wing women.
I parcel my misogyny out a little by little over all kinds of women, so I get it out of my system equally.
Exactly. 100%. You have to very much moderate your misogyny.
Yeah.
Oh, God. But so that is our review here. Brian, do we have any final thoughts before we get to our pluggables?
This is another case where I like this movie. I don't love it. I can recommend it to a very specific type of audience whose taste maybe overlaps with mine. It's very much a 90s satire. Very heavy-handed. It's very direct. Lots of kind of talking right to the audience type stuff. I like it. If you are sympathetic to its politics, if you like base lib shit, you'll probably like it. It's funny. It's not hilarious, but it is funny. And it's pretty prescient. prescient. I think that's, to hit the nail right on the head, the whole concept of this fake outsider conservative who is independently wealthy and funding his own campaign and doing like fake populism.
Like?
Yeah, exactly. I was trying not to spend too much time on it. And the truth is, it's not because this movie somehow eerily saw into the future. It's just because that's what these people have always done. The playbook never changes. So it's an entertaining movie. I get it, but it is only if you're sympathetic to its politics, which I am. So I enjoyed it.
Yes, 100%. This is not a movie, unlike the Billy Jack movies, which for some odd reason reactionaries love. I think if you're reactionary, you will pretty vehemently dislike this movie. But I will say, in my final thoughts here, I did like this movie quite a bit. I think the performances are great. There's obviously a lot of amazing character actors in this movie, especially for the budget. There's so many amazing character actors in this movie. I personally think if you're a big fan of, obviously, our based lib movies, like, of course, the Billy Jack movies and, Bulworth and stuff like that, I think you will enjoy this. But in my opinion, I think this is definitely the worst version of Bulworth. And it's not to say that I dislike this movie, because Bulworth is one of my favorite movies of all time, but it is definitely an inferior version of Bulworth. If you are a base lib and you want to see all your based libness just shown on screen, this is not quite perfect for me, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. Although it would be awesome if we could somehow get the film Bob Robbins Bulworth crossover where they are campaigning against one another and they have to have a musical showdown at the end.
Well, and that's the thing, though, too, is that at the end of Bulworth, he's assassinated. After winning an election, he's assassinated. But in this movie, he is, quote-unquote, assassinated, or like assassination attempt, and then he wins the election. So it's kind of the opposite in that way.
Yeah.
But also, of course, they both win statewide elections. And then after that, I'm sure, obviously, the idea of a presidential run is in the future for both of them. I mean, it's stated in Bulworth. So there could have been a Bob Roberts cross Bulworth showdown, which would have been awesome.
What could have been? Oh, if only.
Honestly, I feel like, and obviously there never was a Bulworth sequel, but I would have loved a Bulworth sequel about how he, like, somehow miraculously survived the gunshot. And, like, he, of course, wins the election. Everybody expects him to still be Bulworth. And then he's like, oh, yeah, that's right. And then he pretends to be Bulworth forever. And he's like, just, I don't know. I like the idea of him, trying to get back the Bulworth Wigger thing. Awesome.
I see where you're going with this. So I do think ultimately, and I think the endings of both of these films,
they're very bleak.
They're bleak and they work for what they are, because that's the reality. If there is, for all the faults of the base lib, one of the things that, and this is a fast vanishing segment of the Democratic Party, is an ability to at least see to some degree how fucked things are and how fucked things are going to be. They don't really have a cogent solution for it, but if nothing else, they do see how fucked things are going. And that, I think, is reflected in both of these films. And I really admire that.
No, exactly. They're like, man, shit's fucked. And they sound like Fred Durst. I don't think they sound like Fred
Although,
Durst.
To be honest, that's basically where I'm at in my life. And I don't know where to go from here. Shit's bad, guys.
You're wearing like cut off jeans and like Osiris shoes and like a backwards baseball cap, just going to people like, yo, shit's fucked.
Hang on. Taylor, you're trying to do a bit, but I literally do wear cut off jeans and a backwards baseball cap almost every day. That's how I was dressed in a Nike tank top, cut off jeans, and a backwards leather baseball cap all day today.
Well, Brian, you got to get some Osiris skate shoes, man. That's what you got to do.
I mean, let's see what those look like. Maybe would I like Osiris? I do wear some.
Oh, they're ugly shoes.
Let's see.
Ugly.
I'll say no. I have a trademark brand of Nike skate shoes that anytime I see them in my size, I buy them. I'll send you a picture of them because a lot of people think they're ugly, but I think they're fucking hot.
No, granted though, they're Cookie Monster fucking sweatpants shoes. That's what they are.
So some of these are ugly, but all right. I'm looking at the Osiris 83 classics. You ever seen those, Taylor?
I'm looking at it right now. The blue ones.
Yeah, these are cool. I think those are cool.
Too bad. The like fucking Nickelodeon slime one though, the 80s one, not great.
Let's see. So like most of these I think kind of suck, but I like those 83. This is a perfect way to end our Millennials. Hey, do I like the Nickelodeon slime ones? I don't think I do. I don't like those. The thing is, it sounds like I'm doing a bit, but I'm not. The NYC 83s. So the 83s are cool.
Are you talking about the Xbox ones or the blue ones?
The blue ones.
Okay, yeah, because I was gonna say the Xbox fucking Nickelodeon ones. Those are gonna be a big no for me.
No, I don't like those. I think it's just the purple and green. It's just, I mean, that's
also that's such an aggressively 90s thing. That is such an aggressively 90s aesthetic, is purple and green.
So the only way that those are cool is if you're wearing a whole fit with incorporating those colors. And I'm being serious. If you're really leaning into it.
God, Brian. Next time I see you, bro, you're absolutely wearing this whole outfit. I want to see
Taylor,
you.
I'm not joking. This is what you described is how I dress in the summer.
No, I'm talking about the Osiris, like purple and green with the whole purple and green outfit. That's what I want to see.
Get me some Osiris's in my size. If you will pay for them, I will wear. We'll do a stream where I show up in a Fred Durst fit because that's how I would. Taylor, if I showed up around like my Portland clique, my friends that live here, like if I showed up to Wisconsin with like everyone that knew me when you knew me, that would seem weird. But to people where I live now, they would not bat an eye. That's just how I dress.
Well, granted though, Brian, people dress like that here just because they can't afford to buy anything else. They've been wearing the same fit since 1999. That's why.
Whereas people dress like that,
it's cool. Even they think it's cooler.
People dress like that here because they can spend $50 on some 20-year-old shoes, $80 on some 20-year-old shoes.
And I just see like homeless people wearing that because they can't afford anything else here. So
maybe I can make a deal with them. Hey, buddy, I'll trade you something a little bit newer. I just see, a couple weeks ago, I saw a homeless guy in an Isham trucker hat, and I wanted to buy it off him.
Hell yeah, dude.
I didn't. I was like, oh, I can't do that. That wouldn't be nice. He probably loves that hat, but I wanted to.
All right, but yep, that is our review. So let's get into our pluggables here. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on twitter.com. And as well, please follow us and subscribe to us on both our YouTube and our Spotify channel where we are uploading every episode simultaneously. And as well, as always, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father campaign. Of course, our good friends Scott, Sean, and Robert are making a fantastic little series. They have episode 1 out. Obviously, watch it if you want, but they need more donations. They need more moral support. They need more everything to continue on this great series. So please donate to them on Indiegogo. I think it's still Indiegogo. I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. So definitely donate to them. In the description. Yes, it'll be in the description as always. And as always, of course, speaking of, if you donate to the campaign, just send us an email, send us a YouTube comment, do whatever. And if you donate within a reasonable amount, we will match. So $20-$25, something like that. Don't donate $500, which somebody did pretty recently, because that is only do it because you want to. We will not match that. I want to be clear. We will not match that. So please support our good friends Scott, Sean, and Robert today and tomorrow and forever.
As well, please follow us at the Millennials Are Old Facebook page and Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram as well. There will be a Threads account, just an easier way for me to quick post updates that aren't necessarily like new episodes, but, topical shit, anything that, Taylor and I talk all the time about millennial bullshit. And a lot of it doesn't actually make it on the show because it's just part of the threads of our conversation, but a lot of it will end up there. It's also just going to be an easier way for you to harass me. If anyone would like to harass me, please do. I need to be harassed online so I can write a sweet think piece about it and relate my life to Gamergate.
Yes, absolutely. And also I want to clarify, it's GoFundMe, not Indiegogo, but the link will be in the description anyways. So that'll be very clear.
Did someone really donate $500?
Yes, it was an anonymous donation of $500.
That was me. I did that.
Yeah, that's why he doesn't want anybody to donate that again, because he really can't afford that. He really can't afford that. Yeah. But yeah, so that's the thing. Obviously, Brian, as always, if you know any, Zoomers, Boomers, Crooners, Gooners, just anybody, if you find any cringe, please post it to Brian. If you have any dick pics or titty pics or ass pics, send it. Just anything that's really cringe and gross, send it to Brian on all of our social media platforms.
If your nipples are like inverted and they suck inwards, kind of like any belly buttons, but they're nips, that's a classic millennial cringe thing that I hate to see. And definitely send me that to make fun of, because I think it's so funny to see the sucked in nipples.
Yes, and if you describe your pussy or bussy as moist, definitely talk about it. Send us a message about it.
That's so cringe how millennials are always sending me pictures of their bussies. That's so funny how they do that. That's why I like to see it.
Somebody, Brian, who follows a certain barber in Chicago who does very interesting haircuts while wearing very interesting outfits. I've certainly seen a lot of pussies online.
That's cool, because I don't know if the actual guys at the shop might not look at that. That's like a hot guy. So you're like, well, if I'm going to do it, I may as well go here.
Right. I was referencing the nude barber. Is that what you're talking about?
I know. But the guy in the photo, I'm saying he looks like he's like good looking, right? I mean, he's not like my type, but I'm just saying, if you're going to be the nude barber, you may as well be like this like Jack's black guy, right? Jack Black guy.
I mean, he is black. I don't think he's Jack Black guy. You said Jack Black guy. I said Jack Black.
Yeah, I said Jack Black guy.
I was thinking, Brian, he does not look like Jack Black, okay? He does not look like Steve from Minecraft. But yes, a jacked black guy, 100%. I
I'm
also
just
love
saying, if
that.
you're gonna go there, you may as well go
No,
for
you might
like
as
this,
well,
like
yeah.
a male model guy.
And by the way, we're absolutely not posting that picture on the YouTube. I would love to, but we're not. But there's one where it says IG Brandon Barber 4. We all have
Yeah, yeah,
fantasize about it.
we all
Chicago
have
Burst
fantasized
fully
about
nude
it.
exclusive cut. And it's just a butt ass like black guy just doing fades in a living
Yeah,
room. It's
he
awesome.
probably makes fucking bank though. Like he probably makes some good fucking money.
I remember watching it. I'm like, oh, this is really funny. And then I watched it, and then it just literally turned into like a gay orgy. And I'm like, this is also really
Well,
cool.
what did you think was gonna happen?
I just thought it was gonna be a naked dude cutting hair. That's what I thought. I didn't think it was gonna go full on penetrative sex. I'm gonna be honest.
You know, that's true because I feel like there is a segment of people who like getting groomed by like a hot person is like in itself like their fetish. So it's
Oh
like for
yeah.
a lot of people that's probably like enough because that is a thing. Like I'd love to have my like beard and my hair trimmed by this hot, like for both like straight and gay men. That's actually a pretty common fantasy. So that is possible that it could have just been that.
Oh no, I found one of just a white guy who's doing it, but he looks like Lex Friedman.
I
Oh.
like how the podcast has devolved into looking up gay pornography.
I mean, to be fair, gay pornography is pretty cringe millennial if you think about it. Oh god. But yeah, so that is our episode. And you know what? Speaking of nude barber, I would like to go to bed in the nude. I'm actually not going to do that. I wear clothes every time. But you know, this movie, obviously, you're talking about a very bleak movie, right? I think bleak movies often make me sleep very well. Would you agree with that, Brian?
You know what I fall asleep to is like literally is like 2000s adult animation. Not like pornography, but like I fall asleep to American Dad. That's how fucking old millennial brained I am.
I am really glad you clarified that because we were just talking about nude barber, so it makes sense. Adult
You know what,
animation.
I've never seen a cartoon that I really was like, oh yeah, I know that's actually a pretty common thing, especially with millennials. There aren't too many cartoons that I think I could give it to, you know?
Not
Bulma?
really. Not that I can think of.
Like I feel like Bulma was like my first crush when I was like 7.
Maybe like a modern adult show that you could like do adult things with, thinking is maybe like Dr. Girlfriend. That's a character.
Yeah. That's just like a hot chick, but like she'd look hotter. She wasn't a cartoon. That's the thing, right? It's like when I see a cartoon, I think like, oh, but it's one dimensional. It's a piece of paper. What am I gonna do with it? You know?
Yeah, it's not very. Yeah, it's not very. Never mind. We won't get into that. But I totally agree.
So real thing though, since you said it, I think I could totally vibe with a chick with Dr. Girlfriend's voice because I do like chicks with raspy voices. So that's like an extreme raspy voice.
No, I'm
totally
down with it too. I'm totally down with it too.
I could get used to it. I actually, just to cap our 2000s animation doc, I very strongly identify with the character of the Monarch. That's probably my favorite 2000s animated series is Venture Brothers, and I love the Monarch.
I love the Venture Brothers. I never watched it beyond the first couple seasons just because I just didn't watch television for a while, but I loved it.
So I don't know if we want to keep this in, but I'm going to say the writing in it's so good. Like the lore is so dense, but so like easy to pick up. And it's so full of references to like 80s punk and post-punk and like all these different strands of science fiction and like obscure cryptic US history. You should definitely watch like at least the first 3 seasons all in order. And, you know, like the show recently wrapped up and I'm trying to get that box set, which is out of print. It's very expensive, but I think I'm going to buy it soon.
Hell yeah, dude. Honestly, well, I mean, your birthday's coming up, man. Maybe I'll make it happen. I mean, depending how expensive it is. I mean, if it's like $500, I won't.
And I think it's like 100.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad for like a birthday gift and shit. But I'm not saying I'm gonna do that, but I'm saying it's a possibility.
I understand. My dad asked me. This is some embarrassing old millennial shit. So my dad asked me what I need for my birthday, and I said I need a vacuum, Dad. Like I don't own a vacuum.
Vacuums are very fucking useful. I mean, holy fucking shit.
I know.
But you know, speaking of things that are useful, I think it's very useful if we go to bed eventually. So you know what? Have a good night, everybody. Don't let.
All right,
Bob
Taylor.
Roberts
I'll see you in bed.
fight. Yes, I'll see you in bed, Brian. 100%. We're talking about nude barber earlier. Jesus Christ! But you're gonna fucking teleport 20 states away.
Yeah, you know, it's just sometimes it's comfier to sleep with someone there. You know, it's scary alone,
especially for someone you just really, really care about. All right, have a good night, everybody.